Welcome back to my channel. My name is Marianne. I'm an artist and educator, and in this video, I'll be teaching you how to paint a water landscape with acrylic on paper. If you'd like to paint along with me, I've made my reference available as a free download below. This book is a visual love letter to my home in Northern Ontario, and I hope this video inspires you to go out and create your own acrylic painting sketchbook. Let's get started. I'm going to start things off by protecting the painting on the opposite page. Then I'm going to tape the edges of my page with painter's tape before priming the pages. If you prefer rougher edges, you don't have to do this. I like to use gesso when I'm painting on paper, so I'm going to combine it with some yellow ochre liquid acrylic paint and a very small splash of water. The yellow ochre adds warmth, and since this painting is mostly made of cool colors, this will balance out all the blues and help the piece feel like it's glowing. For my colors, I chose alizarin crimson, cadmium yellow medium, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and titanium white. I later had to add in some phthalo blue, but didn't discover that until I started mixing. Let's start things off by mixing all of the sky colors in advance, which will make the blending easier. When we use acrylic in a sketchbook, we need to remember that the paper is absorbent and causes the paint to dry even faster than usual, so you get next to no blending time. I'm also using a different brush for each color and leaving it in that color, so I can switch my brushes quickly and blend even faster. We'll start with the blues. Since this is the biggest section of sky, I'm using the biggest brushes and switching between my brushes to blend. Once you've got your sky gradient the way you want it, I'm going to ask you to stop and let it dry. This is going to be hard, but trust me, we will come back to it. While you're waiting for the blue area to dry, we can still keep working on the peach and purple section near the horizon. Again, switch brushes when blending between colors, and don't be afraid to let things dry a little before blending more with the second layer. One of the reasons I love multiple layers, especially with acrylic on paper, is because it takes all the pressure away from a perfect blend on the first shot. Since we already have all of our colors prepared on the palette, when you go back to blend between your dried layers, you can build on top of previously dried colors, which makes blending so much easier because it eliminates streakiness. Now that we've got our first sky layer dry, we can blend between the blue and the peachy yellow by mixing an in-between color directly on the palette and gently buffing it between the two sections. I find doing this is ultimately easier than trying to blend between two colors on the paper itself, especially when you're trying to get a soft, controlled look. I'd also like to note that off camera, I am majorly sweating because blending in acrylic on paper feels like I am working against the clock, and it can be stressful. To overcome this, I am reminding myself constantly that a mistake is not permanent, I can always do a second layer, and that this is just a sketch in a book, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'd also like to mention that your painting does not have to be a perfect copy of your reference image. You'll notice that I decided to improvise with the clouds a little bit and gave them a little more presence than what they have in the photo. After the tape came off, I darkened them ever so slightly more to make it feel a little more moody. Now it's time to add in the dock. I'm going to use some washi tape to get my lines straight, which I like because it's a gentle tape and doesn't pull off any paint underneath. Make sure your sky is completely dry before you do this next step. We're going to be working from dark to light, so I'm going to mix some ultramarine blue and burnt umber to create a black. You'll need to add 2 layers of this paint color since the first layer is going to go on super streaky. If you rush your layers, you can risk disturbing the top layer of the drying paint, which winds up lifting and scraping up all of your hard work. While I'm adding in the dock, I'd also like to invite you to join my brand new, absolutely free 7-day sketchbook challenge. Basically, when you sign up, I'll send you 1 prompt per day for 7 days for you to interpret as you like using whatever media you like. I'll also send you a full list of all my favorite sketchbook materials and some inspiration to jumpstart your practice. It's going to be super fun, you can join anytime you'd like, and I hope you love it. Now, when you're working on small details, it can be tempting to try and recreate everything you see in your reference photo. But in landscape painting, there is a wonderful concept called simplification. Simplification is where you take a ton of detail and distill it down into its most basic forms. Here, I'm not trying to paint the buildings perfectly or render every single plank of wood on the dock. Instead, I'm just painting simple lines and keeping them rough and scratchy to show texture. I'm also doing very basic colors and forms for the buildings at the end, which suggests detail as opposed to spelling it out. The lights on the dock are probably my favorite part of the painting, and here's how I got them just how I wanted them. I started by making sure that they were all on the same perspective line, which keeps them at a consistent height as they move into the distance. Next, I used a script liner brush and dipped my brush in water beforehand to help it glide. Here's one last trick. Just because an object appears almost black in a reference photo does not mean you should use black. Instead, I used a dark gray and I made the lampposts in the distance even paler. This creates the illusion of depth since things fade as they move into the distance, and the gray instead of black helps the colors appear softer and more natural. To make your lights glow, use a dry brush and scuff a yellow halo around where you're planning to put your light before adding pure white last. Once everything is fully dry, you can protect it with some washi tape before we start the water. Just like with the sky, I pre-mixed my water to help it go on, but I will admit the blue that you're currently seeing is way too saturated, so I wound up having to do another color correction layer. At this stage, we are basically filling in rough shapes using the colors you see when you squint your eyes. Try not to worry or overthink this section too much. Just think to yourself, big chunks of color. This is the foundation, so it can be super rough. Make any color corrections you need to, like what I had to do, but just don't worry about any kind of detail. Once the base layer is in, we can add in the waves. Something to bear in mind is that acrylics always dry darker than what you see while mixing, as the binding ingredient is milky when wet and clear when dry. So don't be startled when you're applying your waves that they appear to go on somewhat subtly and then continue to darken as they dry. What I can tell you from years of experience of painting water with acrylic is that you need to stay the course, and I can almost guarantee that your painting is going to look bad before it looks good. The waves at this moment look sharp and fake, but we are going to keep layering to soften them. This is a technique called glazing, where we're adding thin, almost see-through layers of color on top of previous layers to build depth. Here I'm starting to glaze on grays and dark oranges, almost browns, on top of the water to show the sunset's reflection. You'll notice that in my painting it's a little sharper and lighter than in my reference photo, but I'm okay with that because I'm trying to create a painting, not copy my photo. When I compare my acrylic paintings to my reference photos, I find that my colors are usually more saturated and my lines are a little sharper, so my paintings look a little more heightened compared to real life. But hey, that's not a bad thing. That's the art part of it, the interpretive part of it. So just remember that it's okay to have a final painting that looks different from your reference photo as long as you're happy with it. Typically, the last thing I like to add with my paintings is the highlights, which I feel pulls everything together. I also added in some lighter grayish blue for the foam on the waves, being very careful not to go too light with these final touches. The magic of this painting is in the values, which is how light or dark a color is. And even though this foam appears light in comparison to its darker background, it's still a mid-tone color, and going too light would shatter the illusion. I took one final look at the painting and decided to adjust the light on the water to be a little more orange, as I was finding my original yellow a bit too acidic. Orange is warmer and softer than yellow, and probably more true to the photo too. And here it is, the final spread. If you enjoyed this tutorial, you should definitely check out my other painting on paper tutorials, and if you have any requests for future sketchbook videos, be sure to leave me a comment. Don't forget to sign up for my free 7-day sketchbook challenge, and you can also grab my free 36-page Intro to Acrylic Painting ebook. Happy painting!